Pre-college programs, looking at how the university, we do have some TRIO programs on here that do outreach, but more outreach at the lower levels out into some specific areas. So pre-college programming, again, to help with academic preparedness, which is another topic that came up. How can we better prepare our students for the level of work here at the university? So that was brought up in a number of different ways for academic preparedness. Working with our students at the younger ages, 5th and 6th grade, and their parents, and helping them to understand the college pipeline and all the things that they need to do. So that was something that came up. College readiness. We also talked about internships and finding more internship opportunities both at the tribal level and in the private sector and industry, so that our students here at the university level can go back and perhaps have a paid internship at the tribal, or even again in the community sector, and then with the ultimate goal of going back to the tribal communities and helping out. We talked about the community college partnerships and what NAU is doing through our NAU-to-U programs, and how again can we better help prepare our students from the community college to continue on at the university. And also about sharing resources. So we talked about that. We talked about remedial courses and how tribes are paying. You know, there was a question, what's tribes' policies in terms of them paying for remedial coursework? And a question was brought up, which we will hope to find out the answer, is how many students, Native students at NAU, have taken remedial courses, especially the freshmen. So we'll have to take a look at that. Because what comes out of that, as you know, is that students who end up taking those remedial courses, their tribal funding is limited. So I want to say 10 semesters or so of tribal funding. And so that can go away easily when you're spending some of those funds on remedial coursework. The question about, do we have book vouchers? Because we have students, when they receive their tribal funding, perhaps the funding doesn't come in on time, and so the need for those books is really critical to have those available for students, especially at the early onset of the semester. One suggestion was an individual works directly with the bookstore to provide those direct funds so those students can go directly to the bookstore and be able to get their books, and that was something that we talked about. There was a lot of questions about financial aid, so in hindsight, I think it'd be really good to have a financial aid individual there. A lot of questions about the awarding process and how can we improve that awarding process from the tribal level to the university level, and then so that it continues forward and goes into the hands of the student. And I know there's a lot of timeline sensitivity with that and process, so that was a big question that came up. Training on FAFSA, how important. Individual went to training, and Shelley mentioned this, that there was over 7,000 people in attendance at this national FAFSA training, and getting that information and how important it is out for tribes to participate in the FAFSA for their own departments. Talked about FERPA, talked about how getting that information from parents, and so that for the educational directors, so they can contact the institutions, perhaps on behalf of their tribes. There was a request for NAU to look at what kinds of short-term courses can we have, online courses specifically looking at engineering and nursing and forestry available to their students at the community level. Tuition waivers, it was interesting to hear that there was a memorandum of understanding agreement with University of New Mexico and University of Highlands for tuition waivers for Zuni students, and how that is working with that particular tribe, and something that NAU might consider. We know we have tuition waivers, but they offered at least 2 slots for the tribe for each of those institutions that their students might attend. Talked about short-term workforce training that NAU, looking at workforce training development. What kinds of types of training does NAU offer that would be beneficial again to our nations? There was talk about growing our own teachers. We looked at the workforce out in our tribal communities, and teachers was another area, and I think, Chad, you mentioned that. So about growing our own, and how can we do cohort programs with maybe our Center for Education or other areas. So that was just one topic that came up. Looking, and Chad, you mentioned this, moving from EIE programs to tribally run programs was another area of discussion that we talked about. So lots of good requests, lots of good discussions, something for us to take back and to kind of mull on. We talked about also what admissions, so I appreciate admissions being there and being able to start thinking about what can I need to do more for getting out into the communities and working with the parents and the students. I guess last but least that what Kathleen wanted me to mention is to make it known that the Native American Cultural Center is open to our tribal communities, so for meetings or be able to come and meet with their students. We often have a number of tribes come in and sit down with their students and talk with them. So that invitation is open for the Cultural Center. And I think that's